tires. So as the swell came and the boat came up and down, it would spring off that spring line and hold it up against the pier. So as an operator running the boat, you'd just be watching out there. Sometimes, I mean, you'd load. I think we'd probably call it at an 8-foot swell or something like that. We wouldn't go, but we'd go through all these big swells. So the boat would be alongside, we'd come up this giant swell, throw it in reverse, and then put it back in gear to come over the swell. And then until it got a lull, then we'd start loading people again. So also during all this big swell time, you know, when it was calm, it was fine. It was fairly easy. You had two employees on the ramp on the outside of the rail that held on to the people. Then on the boat had 2 people, the deckhands would help the people on. They'd be carrying their tackle box and all their gear as they got on the boat. Never lost a passenger that I know of. We lost a few deckhands and stuff, you know, and I not lost them, but they fell in, you know, trying to catch somebody. I went in one time and then as you're doing all this, you're watching for the swell coming, and you see one coming. You got all these people on the ramp, and you got to get this slow chain hoist to get the ramp up so the swell doesn't go over the people.
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, so
sometimes it did go over the people.
Oh no, and a lot of times you're not fast enough, and the swell would come, and here would be 10 people on the ramp up to their tits in water.
Wow.
The swell would just wash right over the top of everybody.
And so then you go fishing all day soaking wet.
Soaking wet.
All soaking wet.
Yeah.
That's how much people wanted to fish. That's how deep the passion is, huh?
Yeah.
And sometimes you'd go out and a windstorm would come, or big swell would come up, and it was too rough to come back to the pier, so we had to take the passengers to Newport to unload them and get a bus and bring them home.
Really?
And that was a nightmare when that happened. You can imagine that, and then get all their tackle and all their crap home.
Yeah. No, it was quite the deal. I'm sure insurance companies aren't going to be going for insuring people. I think the last one was Malibu. People
but that's calmer than.
But it's much
here.
calmer. It's in Santa Monica Bay, so it's much more calmer.
It's in the lee of Point Doom.
So, where did they tie? How? Because, like my viewers, we don't understand. How did they tie the boats? What do you mean? There was no dock. What did you do at night?
Out on the moorings.
There was mooring cans set.
Mooring cans
Like
outside.
at Catalina, that type of mooring type of setup, or what?
Bigger cans, bigger setup. I think, you know, big 3/4 chain, and so there would be the mooring can, and then there'd be a 60-foot like tether that comes off of it, and we held it up with
gallon jugs,
milk
whatever.
jugs, you know, to hold that up, and then they came up to it and picked up the end and tied it off, and so that's where they were all summer.
We used to go out at night when the boats weren't running, and we'd fish and spend the night on the boats. And we had halibut fishing out there that was phenomenal.
Oh, I had unbelievable halibut fishing out there.
I mean, we caught
Just out in front.
big halibut, and lots of them. And,
all by yourself.
All by
30,
yourself.
30-pound halibut trying to hold it and gaff it. And, But I remember coming in one time on the Reel Fund, and we had like 20 of these giant halibut.
But we used to beg to let us drive the skiff, so we could go in and out and take the cruise in and out. And
that's the other thing is the skiff. How we got out to the moorings, like I was saying earlier, the first boat went out. There's a skiff that had another platform under the pier with a hoist, a big crane, and you keep the skiff in that little platform under the pier. And then in the morning, there's it hoisted up. Then we had this big ladder that's probably 12 feet wide with a whole bunch of rungs, so you could hit that. And that was another thing, is getting in and out of the skiff in the big swell. You know, you're dropping that thing down.
It's going up and down.
Going up and down and trying to disconnect this thing while it's dropping out from underneath you.
And it's pitch black dark.
Pitch black dark.
No lights back then, right? There was no lights.
No, just a little bit on the pier.
And then this is what I've thought of, and I've always forgot to ask the question. So it's pitch black dark. You guys are leaving at 6 in the morning, so you got to get out there to the mooring can at 5. How do you find the boat? From a skiff.
Just ambient light, just off the beach.
There's enough light to see it.
There was?
The boats are big. They showed up.
Oh, okay. That's
There's no
always
lights on. They didn't keep lit.
What about when it was foggy?
Good luck.
Because it's foggy.
That's
Driving
good,
around in the
that's
skiff
a good question.
in the
'Cause
fog.
I remember there were some really foggy days where you're just like, oh, okay, there's this boat, and I think the other one's over here.
there,
You know, I could see no compass in it or anything like that.
Unbelievable.
But it was
But
like,
you did it, and you
yeah,
found
it
them.
was, yeah, it was probably a quarter of a mile off the end of the pier where the moorings were.
Or maybe a little more.
Maybe a little more. Yeah, it was-
That must have been so cool as kids growing up in that world.
Then we used the skiff to go diving all the time. So when between the boats and we weren't working, we'd use the skiff.
Hold on, this guy wants to drive his helicopter right now. So yeah, what was diving like back in those days? It must have been insane. It must have been insane.
All you could carry, basically.
So abalone, we basically only dove West Reef for abalone and didn't even bother with Seal Rock. Inside and 20 feet of water was all the pinks you wanted, and up a little higher, all the greens. One dive, you got a limit of 5.
It was 10 when we first started.
And free diving, and we never even we were certified. Both got certified at the old pool at the old Capitol Beach Pier in 1963. We were 16. And
Wow.
we didn't even use tanks for a long time because there was no need.
Didn't need tanks.
Didn't need to. You got everything you wanted just free diving. So it was really, really good.
And we found a lot of untouched spots that were pretty nice. Pretty good.
Yeah.
And
then because I was certified, then the old man your dad bought me my first set of dive gear. He paid for the wetsuit and the tank and the regulator, no gauge, no nothing, so that's so I could go get his anchors back. So it was a converted fire extinguisher, my first tank.
Oh my.
Yeah. But it
worked.
Yeah, it worked. It passed hydro.
we both had those. They were just real heavy, and they worked good.
Yeah.
But,
And then you guys evolved, and then you became lobster guys, right? You went from, well, Kenny, you worked for the family for a long time. When Bob left to go.
Yeah, I kept working for him. I worked on the Sun Fund for 10 years with Rick. We also fished commercial swordfish and rock cod.
On what was the name of that boat?
The Smoke It.
It.
Yep, the Smoke It. And,
That's because it belonged.
Yeah.
That's not because of what they were smoking on it. Well,
no, we never did that.
But it was that was the old the smoke Smoke It.
Cannery, like they had a place they smoked fish and sold it
in Newport that owned the boat before Doesburg owned it.
And we went to the Tanner Bank, we went to the Cortez fishing rock cod, we went sword fishing for 3 years. We covered the earth killing swordfish.
How big was that thing? Was like 32?
32 or 36. It wasn't very big, but we gave it a ride anyway. We went everywhere in that boat. And then later Bob and I got into research business because when they built San Onofre and also the sewer pipes.
We got the skiff first,
Yeah.
and we started fishing lobsters out of that. And started fishing lobsters with 20 traps, and that was in 75. Started fishing lobsters.
Yeah.
Then we started doing the research stuff and doing the monitoring for the sewer outfall. And then they extended the pipe out. They said we needed a bigger boat, so we built an 18-foot skiff with a 115 horse Johnson on it. And it just started to evolve from there. Then we started San Onofre. Started monitoring San Onofre, the diving for San Onofre for the nuclear plant. And then it just evolved into, pretty soon it got too busy. We got a Farallon 25 and fished lobsters for 20, actually we fished lobsters for 25 years. And then the research business got so big we couldn't do lobsters anymore, so we just went straight into that.
Now, you're talking you guys fish lobsters commercially. Here's something that a lot of people don't understand, and this is something that needs to be talked about. The cycles, the different cycles. You guys have lived long enough to see some cycles, and you guys have seen some cycles, and people say, oh, just because they can't catch lobsters, all the lobsters are gone. What do you guys see? I mean, you guys fish lobsters for 25 years commercially. you guys fish lobsters for fun. You guys done it all. What do you think of these cycles, you know? It's kind of different. I mean, what just happened this year was a pretty darn good lobster year, and it guys have been commercial fishing lobsters here for what, 100 years?
Yeah.
And what's going on? There's still lobsters? That's pretty weird if you think about it, because most people want to tell you that everything's gone. Talk about that for a minute so people understand that.
I mean, probably the most recent thing is like I was talking to your dad about. They want to restrict the sardine catch, you know, all that going on. So all the years that we were on the boats, I mean, we never saw a sardine. When we did see a sardine, it was a big deal. I remember having this thing, this is a 7-spot sardine. You never see these things. I mean, it was straight anchovies for all the years that we were on the boats. Do you ever remember many sardines?
No, you'd see 1 or 2 maybe every 50 days. I mean,
Yeah.
they were really rare, and they were really good bait because they're hot.
And
But
so then all of a sudden the switch, you know, and I was talking to your dad about that. I said, they just went somewhere else, Don. He goes, no, they fished them out. I go, no, they did not fish them out. They went somewhere else. Because how can you have a snap where, and I don't even know what year it was probably in the late 90s when they all showed up again. All of a sudden there's mega tonnage.
Yeah.
And it's just because they moved. And I don't even know if it's a cycle or not on those things, but they moved. And then they came back. So nobody, you know, fished them into extinction.
Same thing with mackerel, bonita. The barracuda are gone. Basically, I don't know if they're going to come back like they used to, but
Well,
the mackerel have, the bonita have.
When I
they're
was
going.
just talking, when I was a kid, I'm not as old as you guys, but I remember the first time I ever saw greenback, and I fished all the time since I was a little kid. I've always had the passion, and I go fishing on my days off still today. I remember fishing on the Clemente with John Manser the first time I ever saw greenback mackerel, and they were gone out of the bite. We never saw a greenback mackerel, and I remember the day they showed up, I thought they were tiger fish. I mean, and they would eat anything. They were the coolest fish I'd ever seen in my life as a kid, because they would eat anything. But
Yeah.
did you guys have mackerel when you were kids? I mean,
I don't think
wasn't there a
No.
big stretch where there was no mackerel?
Yeah,
No
supposedly-
mackerel.
Supposedly they put them all in the cans.
Yeah.
Supposedly. And then bingo, here they come. Of course, to me, the pelicans did the same thing. Bingo, all of a sudden we got millions of pelicans that supposedly had died from the DDT.
DDT.
But where'd all the mama pelicans come from to make all these baby pelicans that showed up? Now they're thick as can be. But
You know, I think there's got to be management, and getting back to the lobsters, you know, there is a really good lobster management. I mean, with the escape ports for the commercials and all this kind of stuff, and you can see the years are pretty consistent. And then all of a sudden, every now and then you'll see a little dip, but most of the time you'll see an increase. You know, the last year that Kenny and I fished was 97, 98 year when we really fished hard. We had 500 trouts. And that was the best year that we've ever seen, than anybody had ever seen. Bob Lombard had fished 40 years before we did, and it was the best season he had ever seen. The first pull of the year, we had over 5,000 pounds hanging on the boat.
Holy,
For one
oh
pull,
my gosh.
one pull. And,
5,000 pounds.
our arms were so sore we didn't even want to go out.
I mean, I like to talk about that. We looked down there, and I would, Middle Kelp Reef, we had 4 traps. We had 134 lobsters out of 4 traps, shippers.
Wow.
And plus
And 300
300
hands
short.
that were just that short.
I remember looking down and going, they're getting out. Pull faster. They're shooting out.
And
of
rev
the-
it up and pull it up even
they're
faster.
shooting out of the funnels. There's so many lobsters in this thing. I mean, it was
Oh.
obscene. We called it obscene. It was just unbelievable.
We hired a guy to come help us just to put the lobsters into a receiver, and we'd ordered receivers and got them delivered in one day. And he'd get 2 traps and have a receiver full, which was usually 70 or 80 lobsters. And
It was
we had a
unbelievable.
mountain of receivers.
We had wasn't this
Yeah.
our big boat? We had all these cleats on here. We had 60 receivers hanging off the boat.
Wow.
Trying to sell these things. Oh god. Plus the price was just like.
Price wasn't the price they got this year.
And if you think about it, guys, that's 5,000 pounds. They're one boat. That was one
boat,
operation.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was just one operation. And then what happened this year? They're still lobsters.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
You guys didn't catch them all?
No.
No. God, that's so weird because they want to tell us that we're catching them all with our hoop nets.
No.
Guys, with your hoop net, if you have the greatest day of your life, you can have 7.
Yeah.
7. Come on. You can't buy into this baloney that they're trying to
But
feed you all the time.
I don't think it was a complaint of the fishermen of what they catch. It's documenting what they catch, so that can be put into the mix. You know, and that's why the report card.
That's why that report card's super important for them to have some
And
type
everybody's getting better. The gear is getting better for hoop netting than it used to be, and people are getting smarter, fishing in different depths that they used to fish. Who knows where the lobsters are, where you find them. That's one thing that we learned.
We always said they
Yeah.
got legs.
They got legs and they use them, and that's, we know one fisherman who believed that you had to be next to the big rock. Well, he wasn't catching squat.
You don't have to be next to the
You don't
rock.
have to be next to the rock.
Lobsters are everywhere. They're in the they're in the mud, they're in the sand. When we do our research stuff for trawling, we don't, of course you don't want to trawl over rocks, so we would scan an area before we go through it. It'd be sand up in Santa Monica Bay. We'd do this trawl through there, and we'd have 20 giant lobsters in this thing in the sand, in shallow water, deep water, wherever. So it's not about being next to the rock at all. They like the rock, yeah, and they hide in the rock, but they're out and about for sure.
They got legs and they use them. And the year we really killed them was a year with south swell, with the current running uphill the whole time. I think they're just hopping, and the current's moving them 3 feet each time they hop, and here they were, and they were thick. And the water was warm, so they were out in deeper water.
Yeah.
So
We always fished a little deeper than everybody else, so we were in the zone that year.
we were in the
did
honey
better.
hole.
We did better than most, or a lot of them. They weren't in the shallows.
But they still got them.
Yes,
I mean,
they
we fished along here and had 17 traps in shallow, and we caught 100 lobsters and moved. There was deep. There
was only 100 in those.
There was only 100.
Put them on the boat and move them.
Wait a minute, we just caught 100.
Caught 200 pounds. We're moving.
We're going where they live, man.
Going to their house.
But that's the fishing lobsters. You got to, and fish the same way. Fishing changes. What you use for bait. You know, what we've always said is, if you get on a boat and you talk to the crew and they tell you they're biting on hot dogs, get some hot dogs. You never know what the fish are biting on. And what you used last time doesn't mean squat. And if they tell you to fly line, don't use a little sinker.